Welcome to Tommy's Reptiles. Let's set up a bioactive Dart Frog enclosure. First, we make custom decorations using gaps and cracks spray foam and cork bark. Just simply place the cork bark in the spray foam and then spray foam the edges of the cork bark. Now it's time to spray foam the Leap Habitat's enclosure. Next, just place some cork bark in the spray foam. Here's how the backside turned out. Now we flip the enclosure on its sides and repeat the same process. Keep in mind that as the spray foam is curing, the cork bark is going to shift around a little bit. Here's how it turned out. Once it fully cured, I started tearing off pieces of the spray foam. To make this process easier, I recommend using a knife or a razor blade. I cut the spray foam to have the smoothest surface possible, which will make it easier for the next step. Here's how it turned out. For the next step, I'm using brown silicone and a Ziploc bag, but I recommend rubber gloves. I'm taking the brown silicone and globbing it all over the spray foam that I just carved. I'm using my fingers in the Ziploc bag to spread around the brown silicone so all of the spray foam is completely covered in brown. It may be challenging, but this step has to be done as quick as possible. You can't allow the silicone to start drying before the next step. Once the background is covered in silicone, start dusting it with cocoa fiber. Make sure it's completely covered and then press it in lightly with your hand. And you repeat this step on the sides of the enclosure as well. Now we do the same process to these decorations that we created with spray foam. I'll be using this substrate. I drilled a hole for this pump that I got at Home Depot for around $9. This pump will be used to pump excess water out of the drainage layer. I'm using lava rock as the drainage layer for this enclosure. I layer the lava rock around 1.5 inches to 2 inches high, and then I level it out. And then I cut a window screen to put over the lava rock. This prevents the substrate from falling through into the drainage layer. You want to make sure that all of the lava rocks are completely covered with this screen. In this enclosure, I'm using the Leap Living Earth substrate. I try to make sure that this layer of substrate is thick enough so the plants could really root down into it. Now I'm putting in those DIY decorations we made earlier. I'm taking some of the substrate and putting it in the cork bark tube and throwing it all around the enclosure to give it a naturalistic look. I feel like it's really starting to come together now. Time to add the plants. Here's how the plants turned out. I put the substrate in that cork bark tube so I could put a plant up there. Time to light it up. Now I'm starting to add some moss. This is green frog moss. I chose this because it really blends well with the Leap background. All that green moss really looks good with this Leap habitat. You can't tell where the background ends and the enclosure begins. One of the final touches is adding damp sphagnum moss. This moss has been soaking for a couple hours and will really help keep up the humidity in the enclosure. I also think it gives it a more jungle look. And here's what we have so far. I think it's looking really good. Now I'm going to sprinkle some leaves all over the ground layer. Dart frogs prefer to be on leaves versus loose substrate. Now for the MVP of a bioactive enclosure, the cleanup crew. In this enclosure, I'm going to deploy springtails and various isopods. Now it's time for them to get to work. I'm going to give the enclosure a really good spray down to give the plants something to drink. So that's it, guys. Now I'm going to let the enclosure settle down for a few weeks before I add the dart frogs. Thank you for watching Tommy's Reptiles.